economy chart, if you had beer at the very, very top, the next two things coming off would be ale and then lager. And then from there you'd have the other styles. The differences between ales and lagers are a couple. One is temperature at which the beer is fermented. Ales tend to be fermented a little bit warmer, which means they ferment faster and you get a lot more fruity, estery kind of aromas. Bigger flavors in general, not entirely across the board, but that's what you can expect from a lot of ales. Lagers are fermented cooler, which means the fermentation process takes a little bit longer, but you aren't getting those sort of speeded up, estery kind of fruity flavors. You'll tend to get a little smoother beer. Some people will also say you get a little bit drier beer because lager yeast can ferment some sugars that ale yeast can't, so it'll end up being a little on the dry side as well. And then from there, branching out, you have all the styles. The one that's up there now is a good one to start off with. IPAs are very, very hot right now. When we first started brewing, pale ale was the big thing. Everyone wanted to make a Sierra Nevada pale ale kind of clone beer. People's tastes have sort of progressed over the years. They're looking for bigger, they're looking for more flavor, and the IPA seems to be where we are right now. Not a whole lot of stats on what a typical IPA is, but anywhere from 6% to you can get up to the double IPAs that are 8%, and a few breweries make some triple IPAs that are even upwards of 10%. Typically an IPA is marked by a nice copper color to a deeper brown color in some instances. Lots of caramel flavor, but the signature of an IPA are the hops. Some of them can be pretty bracingly bitter, but most of them will have a nice balance between malt and hop, and they'll also have a really big floral or citrusy aroma depending on what style they are. In terms of food pairings on IPA, I would agree with both of those, the roasted meats and the barbecue sauce. My personal favorite, I think, it comes from when I was going to school in London, is a nice English IPA with a good Indian curry. Just a great classic combination. Sounds odd, but it's wonderful. Wheat beers, another example of an ale. IPAs were also ales, obviously that was in the name, I thought that was a given. Wheat beers, there's several different styles. The most popular one, or what was the most popular one, was the typical South German style Hefeweizen. They're unfiltered, they're the ones that are kind of come out cloudy. They have a very distinct aroma of bananas and cloves sometimes, and that's all yeast driven. It's not an ingredient in the beer at all. You also have Berliner Weiss, which is a pretty obscure style. Chuck was gracious enough to bring some beers for me.
Not hospitable.
Berliner Weiss is a little bit more obscure kind of style, very tart, a little bit sour, not everyone's cup of tea. Another one that's kind of making a lot of inroads lately, probably overtaken in a lot of aspects, is a Belgian style wheat beer. Essentially a Hefeweizen, but in this case they use a lot of other spices like coriander, orange peel, and things like that. So you can get a lot of different complex flavors out of that. And you can imagine that the food pairings that could come off of that. There's a whole array of things. And then American wheat beer. Not necessarily my favorite style of wheat beer, but definitely notable for brands like Widmer. Widmer's Hefeweizen. Just seems like it was everywhere main difference is you don't have that sort of banana, clovey kind of flavor and aroma in American wheat as you would in a German style wheat. Again, food pairings, I would agree with all those, especially seafood. And also salads. A lot of people don't think of pairing beers with salads, but a lot of the funky flavors and aromas of cloves and corianders and stuff like that can really go nicely with a salad, depending on the salad. We have lagers up here as a style. Like I said, lager isn't necessarily a style of beer. It's a sort of genus of beer. But under lagers, you can find things like Pilsners, Bocks, Doppelbocks, strange beers you probably never heard of, like Schwarz beers and Dunkels, things like that. Again, like I said, lagers it's just the way they're produced and the yeast that's used. Again, hundreds of varieties of Pilsner or of lagers that are out there that you can try. The funny thing that craft beers have this big explosion, and typically craft beers, what you're going to find are ales. There's one sort of mechanical reason for that. It's not necessarily that all American craft brewers love to make ales. It's a lot of it has to do with tank space. A lot of us started off on shoestring budgets. Ales can take 2 weeks from brew day to tap. Lagers can take anywhere from 21 days to 3 months or more. So there was an expediency issue in the sort of nascent craft brewing industry to get beers out faster. So that's why ales kind of stuck on, which is a shame. There are some new craft breweries starting up in the Pacific Northwest. One in particular I'm thinking of is called Chuckanut Brewery, and they've dedicated themselves to doing nothing but lagers. So it's ambitious for them to do, and they make very good beers. So maybe that's the next thing in craft beer is craft lagers. So something to look at. Stouts and porters. Again, these are both ale styles. These are typically very, very dark in color, from deep ruby garnet to jet black. The most notable of which is not a craft beer, it's Guinness Stout. That's not to say that it's the only stout that are out there. I'm sure Chuck has 15 or 20 in his portfolio right now. Porters, for me, I don't really differentiate much between a stout and a porter. I have one technical issue. I don't think a porter should be brewed with a certain type of malt called roasted barley, but that's a fist fight amongst beer geeks like me and others. Just know that they have very similar flavors of coffee to toffee and burnt caramel, things like that. They can be tough to pair with foods. Mild porters and stouts a lot easier than some of the imperial porters that are coming out now. Stouts and porters, obviously, they go great with seafoods and roasted meats and things like that. You get into the imperial porters, it gets a little tough because some of those can be upwards of 10% alcohol, and they really dominate the palate. So if you're going to pair a food with something like that, I would think of something like a cheese, like a Stilton or a Roquefort, something that's really going to be able to back up those big flavors of the beer.
Good story.
A couple different stories how porter came about, and the name as well. There was several pubs in London near one of the main train stations there, where the porters would hang out. Beer was pretty expensive at the time, and a porter's salary wasn't really commensurate with going and buying a beer every day. But what did happen from the taps that were poured, there were drip trays that would run down into a bucket that was called a butt. So they could come in and say, I would want the butt, or the entire butt, please. And that literally meant that the bartender would go over and scoop out what was ever in the butt, and it was half price. Became pretty popular with porters, but what it was really a mix of everything that was on tap. Some enterprising brewers started to realize, hey, this is not a bad idea. Maybe I can start making this beer specifically, and the name stuck as well. So that's where porter comes from. Seasonal varieties too. That's a pretty exciting thing now. I think some of the biggest selling, or one of the biggest trends right now in craft brewing are seasonal beers or packaged beers. I know Sam Adams does a very good job with their seasonal products. Seems like they have one out every month. But it's another great opportunity for you as a restaurateur to find new flavors, to get something new on. If you want to have a tap handle that rotates, this is a great opportunity to do it. Our seasonal beer right now is one called Pumpkin Porter. We've been brewing it for 10 years, and it is by far our most sought-after seasonal beer. It's a porter, dark like that. It has all the spices and flavors of a pumpkin pie. So we sold, how many last year? 200 barrels last year, 400 kegs of it last year. This year we'll sell at least 600 kegs. And that's within about a 5-week period. So definitely look into seasonals if you want to have a handle that can really have some volume. Pales and ambers, they often get lumped together as the same style. They're not really. Ambers tend to be more malt forward, and by that I mean they're a little bit sweeter, they're a little bit more bready, and that kind of consistent flavor. Pale ales tend to be like an amber that has a little bit more hop edge to it, particularly in aroma and a little bit more bitterness. Pales and ambers probably make up the majority of craft beers brewed out there. If you go to any small brewery around the country, you're going to find at least one amber and at least one pale ale on their menu. It was kind of the gateway one, gateway beer. Our examples are 8th Street Pale Ale, which is an English style pale ale, and our amber, I guess technically would be our Killinger. So if you've had those beers, you can know the difference in those. 8th Street's pretty hop forward, but not too over the top, and Killinger's definitely a malty kind of bigger beer. So, anything else? All right, I'm going to throw it to Ted for one quick slide because he knows a lot more about upselling customers than I do.